Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm happy for various reasons. Number one, it's still very cold in London. We were celebrating the fact that it was 12 degrees last week. I don't know if that's a celebration or not. And number two, I feel a deep connection to the UAE. My grandfather, who is Iraqi, but he left Baghdad in the mid 1970s to set up a travel agency here, and he was an agent to several international airliners. So it's great to be here in the UAE. As for SET Advisory, just a slight clarification. I am the co-founder of Global Risk Insights, but I'm managing the Middle East at SET Advisory. The founder, Mr. Edward Semple, he founded it several years ago, and SET Advisory, it's made up of his name, his last name, etc. So it's nothing too exciting, unfortunately. If we step back and assess our daily lives, we start to appreciate the fact that we face a very difficult media landscape. Every day we are bombarded with negative news headlines. We are bombarded with a media cycle that is more hyper-partisan and more negative and less fact-based than ever before. And this sensationalism, this environment, means that we are sometimes rushed for judgment. We receive the news, we filter the news, and we rely on the news to make informed business decisions. And unfortunately, within this environment, it makes it much more difficult to see opportunities, but rather we focus on the risks. This media environment affects the way we look at a new business venture. It affects the way we decide whether or not to enter a new joint venture partnership. It affects whether we would like to enter a new market that is deemed too risky by the media. And through the lens of the mainstream media, we could come to believe many things about the global and political landscape, global political and economic landscape, if we do not properly and critically assess them. We could come to believe that the Middle East is engulfed, consumed, dominated by economic decay, civil war, terrorism, and instability, that the Middle Eastern investor should look elsewhere for returns and ignore home. We could also come to believe that the Donald Trump presidency is going to destroy the US political system, and that the US economy is a far cry from its dynamic past. And thirdly, we all know that the wave of populism around the world, symbolized by Brexit, symbolized by the Donald Trump presidency, the rise of anti-EU parties, has been propelled and sustained by the genuine hurt and angst of the working and middle class, who are experiencing income stagnation and a less secure future. But armed with this knowledge, we should A, not fall into this trap of believing that this populist trend is irreversible, and B, we should not fall into the trap of overlooking the phenomenal growth of the middle class here in the Middle East and in Africa and Latin America and across the emerging markets. So my goal today in this short period of time is to discuss these three subjects, these three misconceptions that have been perpetuated by the mainstream media, and to try to paint a picture of the world that, of course, have challenges, they have risks, but there are also plenty of opportunities. The dictum, with risk comes opportunity, is true. Unfortunately, the geopolitical analysts today focus on war, on terrorism, on the confiscation of assets, the doom and gloom, as we might say, and many of them make a lot of money as a result. I will focus instead on the incredible opportunities and hopefully give you a more fuller and not a partial picture of the world. Let's start with the Middle East. The central aim of this conference, and wonderfully so, is to explore the opportunities around the world, but primarily in the Middle East for hotel developers, operators, and investors. And there is strong reason to look abroad and perhaps to avoid investing in the Middle East. As I stated before, geopolitical tensions, the threat of terrorism, the instability in various countries. These risks are real, and the media has perpetuated this negative image. But there are also positive reasons to look abroad, whether it's to invest in hotels in London, Paris, New York, or to develop or invest in hotels in the population booming continent of Africa. The world is your oyster. However, the uncritical instinct to look abroad, to invest outside of the Middle East, should be challenged. The Middle East has approximately, or the Arabic-speaking world has approximately 350 million people. Over 100 million people are under the age of 30. So the instinct to look abroad misses the diversity, strength, and opportunities at home. There is a resilience and an ability to withstand intense political risks and pressures. which should encourage any investor. Lebanon has absorbed over 1.5 million Syrian refugees and faces domestic political gridlock, but tourism remains robust. Their financial system, even though they've weathered a few storms, remains stable. Remittances continue to flow back, and their high-tech sector has never been more vibrant. Iraq has faced deep domestic instability, but their economy is slowly recovering, and the government is committed to ensuring that their economy continues to diversify and create a more robust private sector. The UAE has sustained itself as a powerful regional economy. Abu Dhabi has continued to exemplify its financial clout, but there's also the increased attractiveness of all Emirates, from Ras Al Khaimah to Sharjah, which shows that the UAE has a diversity of strengths to show for. The purchasing power is here, the middle class is here, the expats with disposable income are here, all the ingredients to create and to sustain a successful business. Saudi Arabia also presents a sense of opportunity and resilience within the Middle East. When hit with historically low oil prices over 3 years ago, the then Deputy Crown Prince and now Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and King Salman have decided to, and are currently implemented, a very ambitious and bold blueprint with Vision 2030. They've decided to modernize the Saudi economy, modernize the Saudi society, and to ensure that the entrepreneurial spirit of the Saudi people can be unleashed. The intent is there, the urgency is there, the execution risks are there, but what's important to realize that governments around the Middle East are ready to introduce new measures, new reforms to improve their economies. Tourism is another industry which the Saudi government have taken very seriously, and this is reflected by Vision 2030. As the land of the two holy mosques, religious tourism has incredible opportunity and potential in attracting even more investors. And the Red Sea Coastal Project is another very interesting initiative which looks to turn over 50 beautifully picturesque islands along the Red Sea coast and to transform them into hotels and resorts which can attract millions of tourists every single year. There are many critics of the Saudi economic reforms, and as I addressed this to asset managers a few months ago in Dubai, there will be risks when it comes to execution. There will be bureaucratic hurdles and hindrances, but the urgency is there, the intent is there, and there are incredible opportunities abound. So my message here is don't look abroad. You can look abroad, but don't uncritically look abroad. Don't ignore home, and you understand the cultural, political, and economic intricacies. When I meet with US investors, for example, they tell me, why should I look abroad? There are 300 million people here in the United States that need everything from food to education to hospitality services. And I understand my market and I feel comfortable in my market. So I encourage you, the local developers and investors in this room, to look at not only the risks within the Middle East, but also the opportunities. Speaking of the United States, if the mainstream media know how to create a stir, it's with President Donald Trump, which leads me to my second misconception that I'd like to challenge, that the US is in decline, that Trump is ruining their political system, and their economy is a shadow of its past. With Donald Trump, we did witness the historic populist revival, and populism has always existed within the United States, but it was pacified, it was contained, and centrist political candidates always succeeded, or mostly always succeeded. But with the financial crash, with the income inequality increasing year by year, and the hurt and the angst of the working and middle class families that people across the Western world were experiencing, they wanted something new, they wanted something brash, they wanted something bold. And Donald Trump pitted the working class against the Wall Street banker and lawyer who lives in excess. He pitted the religious Midwest against the more secular and less conservative East Coast. And by pitting people against each other within this highly charged populist environment, he was able to succeed. And Hillary Clinton was seen as a colluder within this establishment environment. And Donald Trump was there to drain the swamp, as he likes to say. But within this highly charged populist environment, even though it creates anxiety, we have to realize that the US political system is more resilient than people like to give them credit for. They have checks and balances. They have a very vibrant judiciary system and Congress, which makes sure that Donald Trump cannot act alone. And not to forget the civil society in the United States, Over 65 million people voted for Hillary Clinton. If Donald Trump steps outside the bounds of what is constitutional and what is acceptable, you will see them on the streets protesting. You'll see the judiciary checking him. You'll see the Congress ensuring that he does not run amok. So this is the assurance which is very important, that even though we see these negative media cycles of Donald Trump, always remember that the US political system has survived much graver threats. Which leads me to my next point. The whole idea that the US economy, as a result of Donald Trump, will be more protectionist than ever, will see less growth than ever, and income inequality might even increase. To the point of dynamism and innovation, the US economy is in constant change and witnesses constant innovation. They have one of the best universities, educational institutions, research centers, and they attract the best talent from around the world. And no matter who is president, the US economy will always act, because of their private sector, will always renew itself, will always create new products and services, and always will be dynamic, no matter who sits in the Oval Office. From the tech startups in Silicon Valley to the emerging manufacturing firms in Wisconsin, we continue to see dynamism and innovation. The US also presents incredible opportunities within the world of hospitality, tourism, and travel. From the iconic and ever-evolving cities of New York, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Miami, to the less-known cities, perhaps, of Detroit, Oakland, and Cleveland, that have experienced economic decay over the last 20, 30 years, but are recovering, they are regenerating, they are reviving, and they're presenting huge opportunities for tourists from around the world to come to visit these cities and to really show that the United States has a diversity of strengths. There are also positives from Trump's economic legislative agenda. He's cut taxes from 35% to 21%, the corporate taxes, which will likely have a positive impact on the US business community. The bill also cut taxes across the income spectrum, which allows middle-class families to spend more on consumer products. Trump is also consistently signing executive orders to lessen the burden, the regulatory burden of the United States on businesses. The US, although they espouse to be a free market system, has an incredible amount of regulatory burden and red tape on small businesses especially. So this is a good sign, and will come to fruition hopefully over the next few years, and businesses will start to feel the effect of lower taxes and a lessened regulatory burdened environment. Last on this topic, on the United States. Many fear that the role of the US within foreign policy is also something to be worried about, and we see this in the news every single day. But without maybe addressing this directly, I'd like to give a broader point, that the beauty of globalization is not that people are more connected than ever. That is true. But nations are also more connected than ever before. They have deeper diplomatic, cultural, economic, business links, even though they may claim to be enemies or not friends in the media, or their public statements might be quite shocking, and the rhetoric might be very heightened. People still have and countries still have deep business and diplomatic and cultural links, which ensures that people rely, and nations rely on each other for their economic growth, for their prosperity, for their security. And that's a positive thing. And that will ensure, even though there will be risks, there will be challenges, there will be chaos, there will be instability, that nations have never been closer before, they've never been more intertwined, and that is a good thing for diplomatic progress, and that is a good thing for avoiding further chaos in today's world. For my last misconception regarding the middle class, 2016 and populism. 2016 was a tough year for many in the Western world. In June, as a British citizen, I voted in the EU Brexit referendum. The majority of British people decided to leave the European Union for a variety of reasons. Some felt that they didn't understand the EU bureaucracy and didn't want to come to try to understand the EU bureaucracy. The level of understanding of what the EU Commission stands for, what the EU Parliament stands for, what the countless directives from Brussels, what does it actually mean? There was a lack of understanding. And this is a failure from the EU, from the British government, from various stakeholders. But this lack of understanding was a central part of why people decided to leave. You don't like to be in a marriage or in a relationship with somebody you feel like you don't know. The second reason, of course, was migration. And that's something which really impacted voters' decision to leave. An influx of migrants from the EU, from Eastern Europe, which some saw had a sort of direct correlation with lowered wages amongst the working class local English workers. In November, Donald Trump was voted in as president of the United States on similar grounds of a populist agenda of prioritizing the U.S. as sort of, make America great again, America first, and prioritizing the welfare of U.S. citizens over their agenda of being a global player. So, and then in the background, anti-EU parties started to rise. This anti-globalist rhetoric started to ramp up, and this whole anti-establishment message has gained in popularity ever since. What explains this rise of populist politics is varied, and I'm not going to sit here and try to explain it, but the anxiety and the angst of the middle and working class people who felt the unleashed forces of globalization and automation meant that a lot of them lost their jobs, a lot of them lost their security, a lot of them lost that sense of pride and identity that we as the middle class were the ones that drove the global economy since the Second World War. So these shocks from Brexit to Donald Trump might scare many of you. They might create a sense of anxiety. But what I see is a positive reaction. What I see is that political parties, from Britain to the United States, are trying to introduce better policies to alleviate the anxiety and to alleviate the pressures that the working and middle class feel in the Western world. That means better job training programs, introducing computer science from the elementary school, an emphasis on better public education. Policies which you are seeing being introduced by congressional candidates in the United States. In the UK, there's even a talk that they want to introduce a centrist party, a new party, which is very difficult in the UK political scene. But this shows that politicians and civil society, they want to work together in ensuring that this shock will never happen again. That government will cater to the working and middle class and ensure that they have a better future, so you don't see another very vicious cycle of populist politics happening ever again. And that they will ensure that all political parties will be working towards empowering those that are left behind rather than focusing on the elite on top. But rather than dwell on the West, the media, by feeding you this constant news feed on the populist politics in the West, I think it sort of results in the fact that many of us might miss out on the progress and opportunities in the emerging markets. From Latin America to Africa, we see the middle class entering new heights in terms of purchasing power and wealth as a result of improved governance, improved economic policies, and the flow of capital into these economies. Across Africa, from Kenya to Nigeria, we see an assertive middle class, demanding new products and services, from mobile payments to improved travel experiences and air routes. Across Latin America over the past 20 years, we have witnessed enterprise economies that have emerged. We've witnessed sound economic management and macroeconomic management from governments that many of us would have lost hope for in the 1970s and 80s. And this has propelled a new middle class in countries like Chile and Peru and Colombia. Progress attracts tourism. When a country progresses, people around the world want to witness this progress, and people want to make money out of this progress. And as these countries make progress, their citizens will also start to demand better products, better hotels, better hospitality services to cater to their own domestic needs, their own domestic holidays and trips. Demographics also presents unbelievable opportunities within emerging markets. As I noted before, half of the Middle East, approximately, is under the age of 30. In Africa, nearly 70% of the continent is under the age of 30. This is a huge and promising consumer pool to serve. But the challenges are there. They're more technologically savvy than ever before. They're more demanding than ever before, and less forgiving for below the par service and quality. So the lesson here is, rather than focus on the declining incomes of the middle class in the West, be hopeful of the fact that political parties are waking up. None of us like a wake-up call. It's painful, but sometimes you need it to realize that you need to be able to adapt to new circumstances and actually cater to the people that have been left behind. And secondly, rather than focusing and dwelling on the circumstances of the middle class in the West, realized that rather than being a global forgotten class, the middle class is not a forgotten class. Far from losing its consumer power, they're not losing their consumer power. Just look at the middle class that are on the ascendancy across Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. And they don't only have a growing aspirational class, but a young population, a very young population, that are savvier, globally aware, and open to new experiences when spending on a range of consumer products. I would like to conclude with a few remarks. There are a lot of challenges that the hospitality sector or the hotel sector face, and the tourism sector as well. And you deserve the best possible information to succeed. So my advice is, listen to the media, but don't be swayed by the media. Listen to your friends, but don't be swayed by your friends. Listen to service providers, but don't be swayed by service providers. Make an informed decision based on different perspectives, not on sentiment or emotion. As the Arabic proverb wisely reminds us, the best answer will come from the person who is not angry. So, seek advice, seek the opinions of those who objectively analyze the world, surround yourself with good information, because being armed by good knowledge and a mindset that is open to viewing not only the risks but the opportunities will give you an advantage. It will give you the patience and the confidence in the noise of negativity and partisanship. It is within this mindset that you can recognize that the Middle East, far from being a place to take money out of, is a place you can put money into. That the United States is as committed to growing its world-leading economy and sustaining its reputation as a land of opportunity. And far from being an irreversible trend, populism can be reversed through sound economic and social policy. And that even though the hurt of the middle class has driven this populist wave, business leaders must not overlook the incredible progress, the incredible power, the incredible resilience that the middle class across the emerging markets represents, that they experience, and the wealth that they are amassing. Governments worldwide should learn from each other's mistakes and how they deal with empowering the middle class and those aspiring to enter the middle class. Because as we all know, they are the engine of global economic growth. And last but not least, never forget that our world is as young, dynamic, peaceful, and prosperous as it has ever been. Thank you very much.
Basim, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I appreciate your articulate and expansive view of the world.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
When I invited Starwood to Bill Clinton come and speak with us once a number of years ago, he said, ignore the headlines, pay attention to the trend lines. And I think it's that center of mass you're talking about, whether it's the momentum and the potential of this region, whether it's the resilience of the US economy, whether it's the unexpected benefits of populism that I think we'll see. I think, thank you for putting that perspective. When I read Global Risk Insights, I was worried we were going to hear more about risk, but I think we got much more insight. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.